what do you think will be his most lasting legacy in your view?
Yeah. Pondering a question like that is almost impossible where Benedict is concerned, because his genius touched on so many aspects of the faith, from liturgy to dogmatics to sacramental theology to Christology to ecclesiology. As we have a chance now to mark the passing of a year, we're now starting down the road of assessing his theology in its totality. And in that sense, one of the focuses of this conference was to look at the area of Christ in the mind of Benedict. And I think in some ways you could make the case that at the core, the fulcrum of his theology was Christ, was Christology, in the sense of making Christ relevant first, but then introducing him as an event and then as a person to the modern world. And from that standpoint, I think one of the great lasting legacies of Benedict is going to be reminding the world of the greatness of Christ, the divinity of Christ, but also inviting them to have that relationship with him, that friendship with him, which leads ultimately to discipleship. Something that the modern world is starving for, to have that love. But at the same time, discipleship brings with it the necessity of clarity, of understanding what it is you believe. Clarity in that understanding allows you to survive the great tests and challenges that you will face in the faith, living in the modern world. And I think that was the other great gift of Benedict, to teach with such clarity, such poignancy, but then also to take the profound mystery of the Trinity and bring it down to a level that anyone could understand. I think that's a great gift, but it always comes back for him to Christ.
Yes, and he, as you say, he kind of had that prophetic voice, didn't he? And very much able to relate our modern world to the gospel, but keeping very faithful to the gospel too, not compromising with the world, today's world, in all of its particularly moral compromises.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that clarity again. One of the great advantages that we have in studying Ratzinger, Benedict XVI, and we have to put them together because granted, he had different roles over the years of theologian, prefect, cardinal, and then pope. But there is this thread throughout, and you said an important word, and that is prophetic. He was prophetic in the sense of understanding the currents of what he was watching in terms of culture, in terms especially of the West. People love to focus on this question of the Benedict option. He understood back in the 50s and especially in the 60s, in that immediate post-conciliar period, the revolutions of 1968, for example, the same year that the Introduction to Christianity comes out, where we were headed culturally in the West, and the crises that were going to follow, and he anticipated all of them. But it wasn't simply a doomsayer. He wasn't simply saying, here are the problems. He was also offering the solutions. And in that sense, the clarity of his moral teaching, I think, has been seriously underestimated or sort of unappreciated. He lived for decades in the shadow of the clarity of John Paul II, Evangelium Vitae, Veritatis Splendor. But he understood as well the importance of the moral life, that, to borrow the phrase of the saints, you cannot have a profound spiritual life without having a profound moral life. And to have that clarity then of moral teachings, you see it undergirds almost everything that he does. In particular, the dignity of the human person that he always came back to. Building on John Paul II in some ways, but in his own way, he had the beauty of understanding who the human person was, but that relationship that the human person has to have with Christ, and everything that we can learn from Christ in our lives.
And he, because of that Christocentric perspective, it was very much, would you say, obviously everything was in the right perspective in the sense that his focus was on hope, on the eternal hope, the eternal life. Do you think that's also a key aspect of his which will be lasting? I do.
One of his encyclicals was Spe Salvi, It was on hope, on the theological virtue of hope. At a time, too, we have crises of faith, we have crises of morals, but we also have a crisis of hope. If you are separating God, you are removing God from culture, from our lives, you are removing also from it hope of almost anything. you don't have trust, you don't anticipate, you don't look forward to things, there is nothing beyond, nothing to hope for. Benedict teaches us that we have so much to hope for in our lives, but for eternity. But then there's the eschatological reality of preparing ourselves, looking forward to the reality of death and judgment, heaven and hell, of the choice that we have to make. Which do you want? But that still requires faith, but it also still requires hope. And I think one of Benedict's gifts has been instilling that sense of hope in people.
Yes, great. And also truth and beauty. Truth, of course, was very much central to him.
Yeah.
And the importance of beauty, they go together, faith and reason as well.
That's right.
Obviously, those are very much needed today as well, would you say? And that's another lasting thing that he's always going to be around.
Yeah, I think one thing that when you study the life of Benedict, you also appreciate immediately are the dimensions of his personal talents and interests. Mozart, Christmas cookies. Odd thing to say, but there's a certain beauty because he appreciated the small things of how one can celebrate a season like Christmas, but also recognizing the beauty of literature, of music, of art. One of the searing analogies that he always used, and he used it from time to time in homilies, but I think in particular of the magnificent church in Barcelona, where he talks about the stained glass, that you can only recognize the images of the stained glass from within the church, but that also requires light coming in. And that beauty is something that has to be illuminated. So we are connecting then with the transcendent, but we also have to locate ourselves within the beauty of this setting. And the setting was the church. The illumination is God in our lives, but it's also having the wisdom to see the art, the beauty that is shining through. All of that comes together then as a perfect analogy for the life of faith, the Christian life that he was proposing to people.
Yes, and also through the liturgy too.
Yes.
The beauty of the liturgy.
Yes.
Was very important to him, wasn't it?
It was. The recognition also of right worship. He never wrote an encyclical on justice, but you find it in his writings. And for him, justice is giving what is due to God in the traditional sense of the virtue of justice, the cardinal virtue. Liturgy gives us that opportunity, but we are also required to give God what is due to him. And I think he understood that, but that also has a requirement of doing it properly, doing it reverently, doing it completely, and recognizing the realities of the liturgy.
Great. Dr. Bunson, thank you very much.
Good to be with you.
Thank you.